That's right. Great. Well, I think you hinted a few minutes ago on a specific prophecy, Isaiah 9:6.
Yes.
You want to jump into that a little bit and talk about that?
Well, Isaiah has, the gospel, according to Isaiah, is that the Messiah is coming. But the fact that Messiah would come as a baby, rabbis don't deal with that. They see him as the conquering hero.
Shalom, my friends. Welcome to another video where we are going to debunk the head of Jews for Jesus here, David Brickner, on his position on Isaiah 9:5-6 or Isaiah 9:6-7, depending on which version of the Bible you are reading. But yes, the famous "a child is born" prophecy. And we're going to debunk the Christian claims that it refers to Jesus. So let's hear his position. We're going to get into all the rabbinical commentaries. So if you're a Christian, you're chomping at the bit to hear about all the Messianic applications of Isaiah 9. But I promise you, you're going to be sorely disappointed when you recognize what the rabbis were actually saying about the prophecy and how David Brickner basically buries himself in a hole, digs deeper and deeper and deeper. Let's continue watching.
The reigning king, the son of David, which he is. Mm-hmm. But Isaiah also tells us he would come as a child, and even a miraculous birth in Isaiah 7.
Right.
Now, the fact of the matter is that God always speaks in the Bible in the now and in the not yet. Mm-hmm. So if we see Isaiah's promise concerning a child in the context of what's happening in Israel, there's a promise there for Israel. There's going to be a child who's born who, by the time this child is old enough to know the difference between right and wrong, your problem is going to be solved. And yet,
so he's actually making a really good point that I made when I made my video on Isaiah 7:14, which, if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. It's right here. It's called The Virgin Birth Debunked, Isaiah 7:14, and the Jesus Lie. Now, the whole premise of that video, remember, Christians believe that the child born in Isaiah 7:14 is the same as the child born in Isaiah 9. Whether or not you believe that, the point is that he's referring to the idea that there is a fulfillment in the generation that the child was born in the time of King Ahaz. Christians have no choice but to accept that. The same thing, if we apply the same logic, and remember, that's exactly what he's saying. There's an application to the point of now and the future. When we apply that to Isaiah 9, we're going to see the same. And it's even more explicit than you realize. Let's keep listening.
Yet, in that same passage, Isaiah 7 and Isaiah 9, this child, the language gets expansive. And there's a vision, not of just the now, but the not yet. That this Messiah who's coming is not just coming to solve our immediate problems, but ultimately to heal the brokenness of the human heart.
Yeah.
So now let's look at Isaiah 9 in its raw form. We're not going to look at the rabbinic commentaries just yet, but I'm gonna hide it for a second, and then we're gonna look at it with the rabbinic commentary. So this is Isaiah 9:5-6. It says, "For a child has been born to us, a son given to us, and the authority is upon his shoulder, and the wondrous counselor, the mighty God, and the everlasting Father called his name the Prince of Peace." Right? Now here's where we get into the now. It says, "To him who increases the authority and for peace without end on David's throne and on his kingdom, to establish it and support it with justice and with righteousness from now and to eternity. The zeal of the Lord of hosts shall accomplish this." Now, meaning the time that Isaiah made this prophecy, and to eternity. Me'ata v'ad olam. Now, we'll get into the semantics a little bit because there's, a little bit to speak about regarding that. But what David Brickner is saying rings true for Isaiah 9. There has to be fulfillment of the prophecy in the now. It's explicit in the verse. So let's keep listening to what he has to say about this.
The brokenness of the world. And that's what this child will do. And Isaiah 9 gives us some amazing names. Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God. The Messiah is a man. So El Gibor,
Right.
Everlasting Father,
Yeah.
Prince of Peace, Sar Shalom. I mean, just amazing names that no one would give their son,
Right.
unless he's God's son.
So this is not true, right? The name Hezekiah, Chizkiyahu, literally means God strengthens, right? And a lot of people, right, will claim that the rabbis, for example, found this to be an exclusively messianic prophecy, or that there's this idea that, later on, rabbis made up the idea that it was about King Hezekiah. I'm going to show you a source in the Talmud, which obviously predates Rashi by, nearly 1,000 years, if not more, right? Close, you could say at least 500 if you want to really, be conservative with the years. But obviously, the idea here is that prior to Rashi, we have a clear application to Hezekiah being the fulfillment of the prophecy of Isaiah 9. So it says and this is in the book of Sanhedrin 94a, the Talmud of the Talmud. It says, the verse states, "Therefore shall the master of the Lord of hosts send among his fat ones mishmanav leanness." And so this is talking about Isaiah 10:16. What is the meaning of the phrase "sent among his fat one leanness"? The meaning is that the Holy One, blessed be he, said, Hezekiah, who has 8 Shemona names, come and exact retribution from Sennacherib, who has 8 names. The Gemara elaborates the 8 names of Hezekiah are as it is written. And it's quoting from Isaiah 9, right? "For a child is born to us, a son is given, and the government is upon his shoulder, and his name is called Pele Yoetz, Kel Gibor, Aviad, Sar Shalom." So clearly, right, and then it even mentions, it says, but isn't there an additional name, Hezekiah? And the Gemara explains that was not a given name. Rather, it is an appellation based on the fact that God strengthened him. And it says Chizeko, right? Alternatively, he is called Hezekiah due to the fact that he strengthened the devotion of the Jewish people to their Father in heaven. So the Talmud very clearly makes a application to the now that David Brickner is speaking about that has to be according to the words of Isaiah. I don't have to quote from the rabbis to prove to you that there had to be fulfillment of Isaiah 9, 5-6 or 6-7, right? Depending on which version of the Bible you're reading, from now, which means the time that Isaiah issued the prophecy. And now we're going to take a quick look at what the Rashi says. Now here's what's fascinating about the Rashi. Rashi says, although Ahaz is wicked, his son is born to him many years ago to his throne to be our king in his stead. He shall be a righteous man, and the authority of the Holy One, blessed be, and the yoke shall be on his shoulder, and he shall engage in Torah and observe the commandments, and he shall bend the shoulder and bear the burning of the Holy One, blessed be he. Right? And then Rashi clearly, in line with the Talmud, right, which predates Rashi by a significant amount of years, hundreds of years at the least, is a mighty God, an everlasting Father, called Hezekiah's name, Prince of Peace, since peace and truth will be in his days. Now, what does that mean, right? When you look at Isaiah chapter 39, it's interesting because when Hezekiah is given rebuke for making, what he ended up doing was he showed the king of Babylon all of the treasures of the kingdom. And Isaiah says, well, because you did this, now your future generations will be carried off into Babylon. And Hezekiah said, for the word of the Lord that you have spoken is good. For he thought, for there shall be peace and truth in my days. What is significant about King Hezekiah is that he lived during a time of unprecedented peace in the kingdom of Judah, where no one could touch the kingdom of Judah, not the northern kingdom, because the northern kingdom had been destroyed by Sennacherib, right? Previous to that, when you look in Isaiah 7, it makes it very, it discusses the fact that the northern kingdom was going to be destroyed by Sennacherib, but not the southern kingdom, which was at the time being ruled by King Ahaz in Isaiah chapter 7, right? Which, of course, I have a video speaking about Isaiah chapter 7, about the, debunking the virgin birth and all that. But significant to the point being made here, look at what is said of King Hezekiah. No other king is really described in this way. Maybe Yoshayahu, but here, Josiah, but here it's really unprecedented the way he's described. It says, in the 3rd year of the king Hoshea, the son of Elah, the king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, became king. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, like all that his father David had done. He abolished the high places and smashed the monuments, cut down the Asherah, and crushed the copper serpent that Moses had made, for until those days the children of Israel were burning incense to it, and he called it Nehushtan. That's that same copper serpent, by the way, that in the New Testament they say that looks, they say like, just as the serpent was risen above, was risen and the people looked upon it and were healed, so too the Son of Man is raised and heals you. Yeah, in the context of this is speaking about the destruction of an idol, right? Interesting that Jesus is compared to an idol in the New Testament, right? If you're Christian, you know what I'm talking about. So I don't know if that's a good comparison, considering the fact that this same snake copper serpent that was used to heal the people was used for idol worship. So I guess it is an appropriate comparison for you Christians. So you can comment. I would love to hear Christians try to defend this, from the New Testament's perspective, that they're making a comparison to Jesus to idols. But anyway, moving on. He trusted in the God of Israel, and there was none like him among all the kings of Judah who were after him, nor were there before him. He cleaved to the Lord. He did not turn away from following him, and he kept his commandments, which he had commanded Moses. Now the Lord was with him in everything he ventured and succeeded. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. This is unprecedented for any king of Judah, right? He trusted in the Lord more than any king before him or after him. How great is your faith? No one touches Hezekiah as far as that goes with any king of Judah. So really you have this amazing moment from now into eternity. The timing of this has to fit with the birth of King Hezekiah, because that is the now that Isaiah was speaking about here. That's the son who's born. So Rashi also gives us more insight into how this works, where he describes the Prince of Peace and how it applies using some verses in Chronicles. I think the Ibn Ezra uses some interesting applications too regarding that. But it's the same thing that's mentioned in the Talmud, that these names are applied to King Hezekiah. Now, you can argue that also there's going to be a future fulfillment in the Messiah. That's fine. That's not a problem. The problem is when you try to say that this only refers to the Messiah and no one else, because that's not how the rabbis see it, right? Now, this idea trying to mention that these names can only apply to God, and I will look up that part with the Ibn Ezra. Let me see, Isaiah 9, because he gives an interesting explanation how that applies here. So if you go to the commentary with the Ibn Ezra, he says, "Unto us all has come to pass through the merit of the child that is born to us. we know that we know that at the time of the invasion of Sennacherib, Hezekiah was 39 years old, and at the time of the prophecy is therefore called a child. Yeled, Pele Yoetz, Kelgibor, Aviad. And it says, according to some, these are expression names of God, and the following Sar Shalom, the name of the child. I think that all these words are names of the child, as he is called Pele, wonder, because God did wonders in his days. Yoetz, counseling. This is distinctly said of Hezekiah. And he gives the reference in 2 Chronicles 32. So here you have another reference here where you have Hezekiah directly being related to this. So the king and his officers in Jerusalem agreed to keep the Passover in the second month. So it's giving application where it speaks about the word Pele, right? We can look at I don't know, it's popping up, but you can see that he's Kel Gibor, that he was powerful. It says Aviad, the father of perpetuity, because the reign of the house of David was prolonged through his merits. And Od, so then you can see the application that Od means like until, right? So you see and you can look at the Hebrew more in detail if you want more of a explanation, but for some reason it's not popping up. But anyway, you can do the study yourself, but you can see that the rabbis do not exclusively apply this prophecy only to the Messiah, that it does have fulfillment in King Hezekiah in the immediate context. So let's see what he has to say.
And that's what we discover from those 2 chapters in Isaiah. Part of the whole of the gospel, according to Isaiah, is that this seed of the woman, we find out what that means. We find out that was a prediction about the virgin who would give birth, Isaiah chapter 7. And there's a lot of controversy. Oh, you're misinterpreting the word.
Alma, yeah.
Yeah, but of course we know that that's not the case at all.
Right.
Of course we know it is the case, but like he said at the beginning, the from now, right? If we were looking at the fulfillment of the prophecy in the now, then with Isaiah 7, and that's exactly what I explained in this video with Isaiah 7:14, the now refers to Isaiah's generation. So if you're going to say that the Alma refers exclusively to a virgin, then I guess there were 2 virgin births, because in Isaiah's generation, I guess there had to be another virgin birth. So then the virgin birth loses all significance, because now it's not exclusive to one woman, right? It's silly. I'll do another video on Genesis 3:15 to go in more detail, but I wanted to emphasize back to the from now. So in this part of the prophecy, right, Rashi describes from now into eternity, as we were describing earlier. He says, in order to refute those who disagree, the Christians who say this is their Prince of Peace, who is their deity, we can refute them by asking, what is the meaning of from now? Is it not so that the deity did not come until after 500 years or more, right? You can't say that this is exclusive to a future messianic prophecy about Jesus. You just can't. Or that this is referring exclusively to some divine person Messiah. And he explains here that it says, using this word eternity, right? Because people like to abuse the Hebrew and say that it refers to something like, oh, what is the eternity? So then when you look at 2 Samuel, it uses that word ad olam in the Hebrew, and it says, and he shall appear the Lord and abide there forever, right? Regarding Samuel. So if this is before the birth of Samuel, right? So she was this was, I guess, after the birth, but yeah, so she conceived and bore a son. So, and it says that he will abide with the Lord forever. Does that mean that Samuel is chas v'sholom God because he abides with the Lord forever? Like, that's the sort of logic when Christians like to obsess over, what is forever? Oh, Hezekiah didn't rule forever. Well, Jesus never ruled on the throne at all. So Hezekiah beats Jesus every time, no matter what you want to say. He ruled on the throne. He brought peace to his generation. Oh, it wasn't forever. Jesus didn't even rule in a time. Well, for one thing, he didn't rule, period. He never sat on a throne, right? He never had any sort of authority in any shape or form. Now, then when you look at the time that he lived in, he also didn't live in a time of peace. He didn't bring upon peace, right? So at least King Hezekiah was able to establish peace in a way, right? If you look at what happened when Sennacherib came to attack Jerusalem, all Hezekiah did was say a prayer, and then an angel came and destroyed the entire army of Sennacherib. He didn't even lift a finger. That's how much faith Hezekiah had, Chizkiyahu HaMelech. No other king experienced that type of miraculous experience other than King Hezekiah, right? You can read about it in the book of, I think it's actually in the book of Isaiah, maybe another account is in the book of Kings, and Hezekiah even was able to, through his own prayers, make atonement for others. I made a whole video about that, right? Where this is one of my favorite videos that I made on the channel.
Among the nations.
Check it out if you haven't. But this is a video where I go into detail about the best way to debunk the New Testament. Blood sacrifice is not the only way to atone for sin. I want to play a little clip from that because a lot of people have a problem with the idea of they say, well, Jesus is sinless, so we have to believe in Jesus because he's the only way to deal with the problem of sin. I want to play you a little excerpt from this video, the best way to debunk the New Testament. Blood sacrifice is not the only way to atone for sin. Watch the whole thing if you get the chance, but let me find the clip here, and you'll see it's gonna, if you haven't asked this question, you should if you're a Christian.
Sincerity. Why do Christians trust the New Testament that Jesus or Yeshua was supposedly sinless? Not that it makes a difference if he was or not, but how do you even prove something like that to be true? Do you have secret hidden cameras from over 2,000 years ago that caught footage of Jesus or Yeshua's every moment of life to prove that he never ever sinned in his whole entire life? The New Testament doesn't say much about his childhood. Are we sure he never told a little white lie as a kid, or that he never talked back to his mother and father? It just seems strange to me when I hear Christians insisting that Jesus or Yeshua was sinless with this brazen confidence when there's literally no way to validate such an extraordinary claim. But back to the New
So yeah, give that a watch if you have time. As you can see, I tried to make it funny with the memes. Let's see, do they have anything else to say, or did they move on to something else? Let's see.
And so we can get into all of that, and the book does.
Good.
And so
No, he's getting into his book. So I think he does a shameless plug for the book, and that's pretty much all he has to say about that. But yeah, back to Isaiah 9. Like, this is very clear. Like, if you use his premise that, and I agree, right? There has to be some fulfillment. It literally says from now into eternity, right? Rashi didn't make this up. The Talmud didn't make this up, right? If you want to say that these names can only refer to, Jesus for some reason, Jesus didn't fulfill any of these prophecies, right? He didn't establish peace. Sin still exists in the world. If you're going to go into the sin thing, right? You have no proof that he was some sort of sinless man. He didn't rule as a king. He didn't get rid of Israel's enemies. Nothing was solved with Jesus dying on a cross. Absolutely nothing, right? Jesus doesn't have a monopoly on the word son, right? As much as Christians want to claim that every time the word son appears in the Hebrew Bible, that it has to refer to Jesus somehow, and then even if it's referring to a sinful son, well, that's just, we're going to ignore that, like in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 12 through 16. I did a whole video about that, right? When we talk about differentiating between messianic prophecy that is exclusive to the Messiah, son of David, and generic prophecies that are, might have application to the Messiah, son of David. We're doing that right now, by the way. We're making those differentiations. Isaiah 9:5 is not exclusive to the Messiah, son of David, and no one else, right? It might have future application to the Messiah because it does mention the, Davidic line. So it does definitely have a certain level of specificity when it says upon David's throne and kingdom. So that's why we're applying it very specifically to King Hezekiah, but it's not exclusive necessarily to King Hezekiah. And that's why you have rabbinic commentaries that do recognize that there will be future fulfillment in the future Messiah. But to claim that Jesus did anything here, aside from the Christian claiming that for some silly reason they claim he's God, right? When the application isn't claiming that this individual must be a God man. It's simply using a word that describes, if you know what Chizkiyahu means, then it's not a surprise that Kel Gibor would be used to describe him, because it's not saying that he is a God man. It is simply saying it's like a play on words of his name, that he was able to strengthen the nation of Israel and Judah like no other king had really before him. And that the lasting effects of that will ultimately culminate in the future Messiah. That's fine. But to claim that Jesus did something unprecedented in bringing Jews together, no, Hezekiah wins every single time, right? You can spiritualize it and metaphoralize it all you want. But the reality is that Hezekiah brought the Jews closer to the Messianic era better than Jesus could ever hope for. No matter how you try to slice it and how to dice it up and pretend like, oh no, he is a second coming, just you wait. Nope. Hezekiah wins every single time. And that is why you have so much emphasis on this in the Hebrew Bible. It doesn't say, oh, wait, just you wait a few hundred years and then Jesus is going to come and then all this stuff's going to happen, because none of it did. But you see in the actual Hebrew Bible here, you want to read the Bible for what it says? Read Kings chapter 18, 2 Kings chapter 18, and tell me, after reading Isaiah 9, 5 through 6 or 6 through 7, that this can't refer to King Hezekiah. Just try. And you're going to see all sorts of cognitive dissonance when you do that. And then compare that to what Jesus did or actually didn't do with regards to it, and you're going to have to, if you're a Christian, you're going to have a problem. Because now into eternity doesn't mean hundreds of years in the future into eternity. There has to be fulfillment in the generation that Isaiah made the prophecy. There is no way around it. And Rashi knew it, and we know it without even looking at the Rashi. From now into eternity. So anyway, I hope this video has been a blessing to you all. Please like, share, subscribe, spread the word of Torah so that people will stop falling for this silly idolatry of worshiping Jesus and claiming that Jesus has to be your Lord and Savior and all this nonsense. I hope this video has been a true blessing to you all. Shalom Aleichem.